Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I am Steve Noxon, and joining us on the phone now is State Senator Rob Sampson. Senator Sampson, how are you, sir?
I am well, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Always enjoy our conversations. Thanks for joining me here again today. So we just completed the legislative session last week. Just what are your what are your closing thoughts on how this legislative session went and what they did?
More of the same, I guess is the best way I could put it. Democrats are going to do what Democrats do, and that's to grow government, increase government spending, influence over our lives, and slowly but surely separate the people from their own government. There were a lot of policies like that this past year. I mean, a lot of anti-business policy, a lot of anti-freedom policy, and more irresponsible budgeting and government expansion.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's a year that ends with a number. I mean, this is just how it goes when you come into session. The thing that disturbs me the most is you mentioned the anti-business policy. We have a governor who came into office saying that he was really going to try to incentivize business and grow business and, make Connecticut a more friendly place for business. Unfortunately, he seems to have a legislature that is working against that very desire, because no matter what they do, there's always anti-business legislation coming out of the legislature.
Yeah, I serve as the ranking member of the Labor Committee, and I can tell you that every meeting is a parade of bills. They're small cuts though. It's death by 1,000 little nicks, and some of them are huge and sweeping actually, but mostly it's a lot of small individual policies making it harder for companies to enter Connecticut, for people to do business here, and a lot of playing favorites. We saw another corporate welfare bill this year for Sikorsky. You were mentioning the gag order bill a little while ago. Captive audience, I debated that on the floor for over a couple hours, I think, this session. And these are things that are just, telling anyone who wants to, have some entrepreneurial spirit or bring a business or be, to Connecticut or expand a business, that you're not welcome here. And it's entirely the wrong message. What we should be doing is trying to encourage economic growth so that we have a way to pay off our, sizable long-term debt obligations and make Connecticut a fruitful place so people are better off in the future, so people want to come here to work, live, and retire.
It's pretty amazing that every opportunity they get, and as you say, it is death by 1,000 cuts, because we talk about some of the bigger issues like the Unemployment Trust Fund and how that should have been paid back with this COVID relief money, because, I mean, that's a direct, directly related to COVID, and that's what the relief money was meant for, but they figured out a way to kind of divert that elsewhere. But it's the little things, too. It's like, talk about things like the pass-through entity tax credit. That gets put into place, then it gets reduced, and it's costing business owners money. And it seems like every time you turn around, there's just another cost being put upon the backs of businesses.
Right, and any chance we get to get ahead is immediately undermined, because the moment they see that they have any kind of money hanging around anywhere that's unspent, or no one's watching it long enough to put it in the right place, they're going to grab it. You just mentioned the unemployment, experience fund, and we passed a bill this year that actually provides unemployment for striking workers. How are you supposed to get back on top of that situation if you keep expanding the pool to people that really shouldn't be eligible to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, there is no way. And it just, that to me, that was one of the most offensive bills of all, because it just incentivized people to go out on strike. If you're going to go out on strike, there ought to be a cost to pay. Admittedly, you don't want to get to the point where you have to strike, but that's always a risk, and that's always a threat against the businesses when you're negotiating with them. But there should be a cost associated with that. It shouldn't be subsidized by the state.
Absolutely. It should be a level playing field. And, this is something that the majority party in Hartford forgets all the time, which is that their obligation is to all of their constituents on all sides of every issue. When we certainly they can move their agenda all day long, as I would. But when it comes to actually passing policy, it's got to be fair. And they've taken the role of actually replacing the lobbying mechanism for the public sector employee unions. They actually just put these things right into the law. Forget the union having to lobby for paid holiday like Juneteenth. That was just something that just happened last week, and sadly, only myself in the Senate and my colleague Representative Master Francesco had the courage to vote against the bill because it's highly politicized. But at the end of the day, the only reason why we were voting no is not because of the merit of the Juneteenth holiday. That's a whole separate conversation. The issue is that was yet another paid day off for public sector employees who just got a massive, massive raise, 2.5% guaranteed over 4 years, plus a $3,500 bonus. And for the average state employee, that amounts to a little over $40,000 in raises. Of course, there are many, many good state employees, and I get this all the time. Why are you picking on us? The fact is that there are many, many really qualified and capable people, but then there are also people like the folks that work for the emissions department today who have essentially nothing to do when they go to work. They're still required to show up and sit in front of a computer, but they have no mission. They don't even have a job to do, and we're paying those folks and giving them grand raises. Let's put them to work doing something productive.
There were so many things that came out of this legislative session that I just thought were so absurd. And you mentioned one of them, giving unemployment benefits to striking workers. The other one that got me, and I don't think it passed, but to put it into law that every single vacancy in state government has to be filled. In other words, you can never capitalize on someone either retiring or leaving and reducing or eliminating that position. By law, that position would have had to have been filled. In other words, you can never reduce the size of government.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, things are going to change, just like in any industry. Businesses are changing the way they do things. We were just talking about, people working from home versus in the office, and there are, more and more technology happening with things. You've got to be able to adapt. And government doesn't want to adapt. It just wants to grow. And that's the problem that we're facing more than any other single thing that is prohibiting Connecticut from being, the diamond that it once was. The destination for people who want to live in an extraordinary place with close proximity to Boston and New York, and plenty of job opportunities and a high quality of living and plenty of opportunity to live the American dream. And sadly, we're chasing away the producers right now. Connecticut has a reputation for being a painful place to live as a working stiff. If you're an average person who just wants to get up and work hard every day and build your life and your family and have a nice home and everything else, it's a hard place to do it compared to other places in the country, while we are simultaneously inviting people to come here for free benefits. The state budget you mentioned, which you'd love to talk about that too, which is a disaster by any measure. And the idea that the Democrats and the news media at large trying to portray it as some sort of responsible budget that actually gives tax relief, that is absurd in my mind. And that record needs to be corrected. But what they're in that budget, they have an expansion of Medicaid for undocumented aliens. It's just let's bring people here who are going to have to take money from the state government instead of producing to grow our state's economy.
I remember when Governor Lamont was first elected, and we were having some serious financial issues, and he was claiming that he had looked everywhere he possibly could. He was cutting everything he possibly could. He had done everything he possibly could to reduce the cost of government here and during these difficult economic times. And then that very day, he announced that the children of illegal immigrants could go to state colleges and universities paying in-state rates. Yep. And I thought, wow, and I normally, at that point, I wasn't very active politically, but that was the one thing that got me out of my chair and got me down to one of these town hall meetings that he was holding at the time, because I wanted to ask him about that. How can you tell me you have cut every dime you can at the same time you're turning around and finding new and creative ways to give away more of the state's money? And he had no answer for it. It was like, the way when I mentioned this at the town hall meeting, the whole room burst into applause. Like, yeah, what are you doing here? And he was just like, I believe the children are our future, and treat them well and let them lead the way, and all this happy talk stuff. But they always do that. They always bring up this happy talk kind of to paint over these horrible policies. And they're doing it again this time with the gaslighting. The governor's running around taking credit for having, created a $4.8 billion budget surplus, when I've been asking and have yet to find an answer to this question: what did he do exactly to lead to that?
Absolutely nothing. We are the beneficiaries of the federal government printing lots of money and sending it to the states. And it bailed out the state of Connecticut state government and their irresponsible actions over the last decade in an unbelievable way. And without COVID and without the ARPA funds, which is this latest batch of billions of dollars of federal aid, the state of Connecticut would be in an extreme budget deficit this cycle. And let us not forget that the state has still got major long-term obligation problems. We have the highest per capita debt in the entire country, which is, on your balance sheet, the number one thing that should tell you that we have the most poorly run state government in the country at the same time. It really is a time for a change. And really what I wish would happen more than anything is that the news media in the state, the big news media, the television networks and the major newspapers actually start reporting the truth instead of the talking points of the Democrats. It's infuriating to me when I read the paper and I see, the argument being made for their version of our state government's finances instead of reality, because I know just how distant from reality it is. And I think people on the street know that too. That's why they're at any chance they can get hardworking people and people that own small businesses are still looking around the country for places to go. And the evidence is right in state government itself. When we have to start giving special package deals to major industry like Sikorsky to keep them here, that should tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
They should be wanting to be here just because it's a great place to be. And the consequence of giving a benefit to someone like Sikorsky, which, hey, I want to keep them here as well. But the consequence of that is every dollar that you give them in a tax credit has to be made up by small mom and pop businesses and everyone else across the state. And that's just not fair.
Well, I think it's also a very blatant recognition that this is a business-unfriendly state, as you pointed out. Every survey you read, we're like 48, 49 on those lists of business-friendly states. And, if we have to pay a company like Sikorsky that has a huge footprint here to stay here, that just is it's an indictment of the way this state is being run. Look, even GE, a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation, finally threw up their hands and said, okay, we can't do this anymore. And that is no small move for a company like GE. They have a lot invested in wherever they are. And if they look at the future and they say, we don't want to be here, and they actually spend the money to leave, that should tell you everything you need to know about your policies.
Yeah, it's remarkable because, corporate welfare to me is one of the worst possible policy decisions that can be made. It really is. As I said, it is a redistribution of wealth program in and of itself. It's the government picking winners and losers. It sets the government up and therefore the taxpayers to have to continue to do it, because once you start handing this money out to various companies, other companies come looking for it. Or in the case of Sikorsky, they come back a few years after the last deal with their hand out again. And more important than even those things is it is just so dangerous that you are empowering government officials to decide which businesses are going to succeed and fail based on, who they're willing to give taxpayer dollars to. It's just ripe for corruption and extremely dangerous. And it says a lot when a major corporation like GE, who has offered money from the state, so they're obviously on the in crowd and there's a lot of, behind the scenes handshaking going on. That's still not enough for them. They're like, nah, actually, we appreciate your bribes, but no thank you.
Yeah, it just doesn't cover the cost. Well, your friend, former state senator Joe Markley, and I've had this conversation many times. It's, when you are sitting in a position where you get to pick winners and losers, the only people that are going to be the winners are the people who can afford the lobbyists and the attorneys and the glad handers to go hang out in Hartford all day and make sure you get the deal made for yourself. Small businesses just starting out, they don't have those advantages.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's an unfortunate realization that the notion of the self-made person, entrepreneur, industrialist who gets ahead by hard work and coming up with brilliant ideas and really putting the effort in is the type of business that will thrive and succeed in America. That's really been replaced by the people that know how to work the system, or how to get the government grants, or it's Elon Musk. Some days he seems friendly to my causes, and sometimes he doesn't. But one thing is that he knows how to work the federal government to go ahead and get them to offer millions, in fact, billions of dollars to subsidize his products to sell to the public. I mean, how many people have that opportunity, no matter what industry you're in? And it's all, because he knew how to manipulate the political winds, clean energy, et cetera, et cetera. But it really shouldn't be that way. The market should dictate who's going to win and lose, and not some elected politicians. And what worries me even more than that, Steve, is that we are moving away from elected politicians. I know the last time I talked to you, I was complaining about a bill that had passed through the Government Administration Committee, but it's now become law. And that is the bill that actually allows for remote meetings for town government. So boards of ed and town council meetings can now take place not in person, just remotely. I don't mind doing it in a hybrid way. I think remote meetings are great. I think it gets people to participate. But there should be a requirement that those meetings do happen in person, where angry citizens can show up and confront their elected officials face to face. And I think that's a great loss if towns begin to move away from it.
Well, yeah, because we've seen so many of these elected officials, they want to just kind of avoid the public. Leave us alone. Let us do our jobs that we were elected to do, and you should have no say in this. This push toward removing the parents from any say in the education of their kids is really frightening when you think about some of the things that they've already accomplished and some of the things they're already pushing in the school systems.
Right. That's progressive socialism in a nutshell. It is the notion of the government owning everything. There are many, many bills that passed this year that really minimize property rights, particularly landlords losing the ability to make determinations about how their property is being used, being limited in their ability to make private contracts between themselves and their tenants, local towns having their zoning overridden by the state government. The government, centralized government, is growing bigger and stronger and farther from the people. America was founded on this concept of representation. The strongest and most powerful government was closest to the people. It was the individuals, the most powerful thing, and then your local government would have the next most say, and then your state, and then your federal. And things are flipping on their head more and more all the time. So now government is moving away from being local, and it is going off to some far distant place. And it's actually getting harder for citizens to even be able to have a say in any of it, because their elected officials are purposely taking their own power and transferring it over to bureaucracies. And they're doing that to remove themselves from accountability. We always use the example of Pura. The legislature used to vote on electricity rates, but not anymore. They created a bureaucracy for the purpose of setting those rates, because that way they can make all the bad policy in the world that drives up electricity rates and not have any of the accountability, because they just say, oh, no, those Pura people over there did that, not us. And that's happening more and more in different ways on all parts of government.
Oh, yeah, we saw them they were going to implement that if they were successful in getting the tolls put on the roads here. They were simply going to turn over the decision about where and how much to an unelected group of people, and we were not going to be able to have any sort of say in what they did or how they decided. You mentioned the budget. I want to get back to that real quick before we run out of time here. I agree with you about how this is being reported on. It really frustrated me when I came in the morning after this budget was approved to see that the big headline is $600 million in tax cuts, historic tax cuts. And then you read, at the same time you got $600 million in tax cuts, you got $1.9 billion that is being given to state union workers as bonuses and raises. You got increases in spending across the board, it seems. I don't understand how you can focus on these supposed tax cuts when so much more happened in this budget than just the tax cuts.
Yeah, well, I was listening to Senator Berthel before, and he said something that we sit next to each other in the caucus room, and we actually had this conversation about comparing it to, small dollars in your pocket. And it is very much like someone, reaching into your pocket and taking $20 from you and then handing you back $5 and pretending that they're generous. That is exactly what's happening in our state government. They are spending way more than ever. The problem, partly, Steve, is that it's so complicated because, there is a fiscal year, then there's a calendar year. There are expenditures that go on beyond the individual year that they're spent in, when things will be paid back. But in simple terms, the state budget has gone up maybe 50% since I first got elected in 2010. I remember the state budget was around $17 billion back then, and that included all of the pass-through federal Medicaid spending. Today, that number, not including that $4, $5, $6 billion for Medicaid, is 22, 23, 24 billion over the next couple of years. So the state government is spending 50% more just in 10 years than they had done in all of Connecticut history. And that should just give you an indication of just how out of control things are. This is a 6.5% increase in spending over last year. And that was a 6.5% increase over the year before that. And if you really want to know whether you're paying a lot of taxes, look at the spending figure. The idea that they're somehow giving you back, a property tax credit, which I appreciate very much and something that I've been advocating for. In fact, I voted against removing several times. That's great, except for the fact that if you track the spending number, that's how much taxes you're paying, because all of that spending comes from taxes. So it just means you're paying it in some other way. And, of course, the biggest way right now is inflation. Inflation is driving up the cost of everything, and therefore the state is benefiting with the massive surpluses. So they have a pile of money because of tax receipts going up because of inflation and because of the gift of federal funds, which is your tax dollars, being, more money being printed and put into the economy. All of these things are bad for individuals on the street. That means your money is worth less, and they're taking more of it all the time. That's not a good combination. And as you pointed out, the real issue is that the state of Connecticut, because of those factors, is overtaxing people. They have taken so much more of our money than they needed to, and they give back a tiny little piece, and they pretend like they're doing good. Republicans offered a tax package that actually gives back $1.2 billion, which is not as much as I would have liked to done, but it's still and it's real tax relief that actually extends permanently into the future instead of a lot of the temporary items that the Democrats have put forward. And some of the items that Democrats count as taxes are not tax cuts at all. They count the earned income tax credit as a tax cut, when in fact that is not a tax cut. That is giving people who have not paid any income tax at all a tax refund at the expense of people who do pay taxes. How calling that a tax cut is just disingenuous.
No, it's just redistribution. That's all it is. The other real serious issue that I have with this budget is it doesn't plan for bad times. And I think we're repeating the errors of the rolling years, where we were budgeting and spending as though the good times were going to roll forever. There's never going to be a downturn in the economy. We're never going to experience a recession. Everything is going to be great for the rest of time. And history proves that what's the word I'm looking for? It's wrong. I mean, I can't think of a better word for it other than just wrong. Yet whenever we hit good times like this, we just start spending like drunken sailors. And we act like this we're never going to see a downturn. Well, I'm sorry, but you look at any key indicator here across the board, and things are not great. And it's all going to come to a head here real soon. Between the supply chain issues, heck, they're talking about diesel fuel running out maybe by the end of June here because our supply is going down so rapidly we can't replace it because of the policies from the federal government. I mean, all of those things are going to lead to a massive disruption in our economic activity here in the state, and yet we're budgeting like things are going to be great for the rest of the time.
Yeah, you're totally right, Steve. I mean, it's all a mirage. I mean, it really is. Anyone who understands economics knows that the definition of a strong economy is production. Production is down. Because there's a lot of money floating around in our society does not mean that people have wealth. Wealth is actually production. And if you have less production to go with a lot more dollar bills floating around, that's where you get inflation. and the devaluing of the currency. And I think we've only seen the beginning signs of that. And I think it's going to get much, much worse, unfortunately. The Democrats in Connecticut, I think they are as amazed every 2-year election cycle as I am that they get reelected. It seems to me that they always feel like they're on borrowed time, that, eventually the Connecticut taxpayers and the people across this Connecticut are going to be fed up with the mountain of bad policies. And I mean, we didn't even touch the crime issue. We didn't touch the healthcare issue. We could have touched 1,000 other things that I could say that they're doing very, very poorly compared to other states in the country. And it just doesn't seem to catch up with them. But I think they feel like they're on borrowed time, and they try and move their agenda in as giant steps as they possibly can every cycle, thinking, this might be our last chance. And then they get reelected.
Yeah.
And they get to do it all over again. And I am so hopeful that this is the last time that they end up with a majority after a 2-year election cycle, because we can't do it anymore. And something else that's very important that I know you were talking with Senator Berthel about was the Republican ticket this time. Look, I'll take any Republicans over the Democrats, but there are some primaries out there, and I encourage people to do their homework and choose the most responsible and principled conservative Republican candidates you can. We need warriors and fighters. There are way too many get-along-to-go-along Republicans in the state already, and I don't want to see any of them elected to our statewide office if we have the great chance to actually put people in place that can make real change. So it's super important that people know who the good, strong candidates are.
Well, Senator Sampson, it's always a pleasure to have you on here, and I always appreciate your efforts. And I know you always seem like you're fighting an uphill battle, but I think incrementally you're making a difference, and I hope you continue to do so, sir.
And thank you for everything you do, Steve. Like I said, at least I know that you got the Waterbury airwaves covered, so I can leave that alone.
We'll take care of that for you. Senator Rob Sampson, always a pleasure, sir. Take care.
You as well. Bye-bye.